Hello, it's Gabrielle here from Boingboing and the Centre of Resilience and Social Justice based at the University of Brighton. We've been asked by the Hastings Opportunity Area to talk to you about the new statutory RSHE, which you might be teaching as PSHE. So we've got some tips based on some of our work in mental health and resilience, and to see how we can help you to teach the mental health and relationships side of the PSHE. Let's see what we A good place to start is probably to have a little think about how you feel about teaching RSHE or PSHE. Are you thinking, oh, it's another thing I've got to learn about, new stuff when I've got so many other things to do? Are you feeling like this is a bit nerve-wracking because I don't feel an expert in this and I may say the wrong thing, I may teach it in the wrong way, it feels quite important to get it right and you may not feel equipped to do so? Or are you feeling very excited? Do you feel like this is the lesson where you can really experiment and do new things and help the pupils to learn in different ways, where perhaps different pupils will really flourish from those who flourish in other subjects? You won't be surprised to hear that I think it's very exciting. I think it's a fantastic opportunity and incredibly important, particularly now when pupils really stand to benefit from some of the information that you can help them with, understanding about their mental health, understanding about perhaps feelings they've been having because of the really challenging situation, and learning how to name their feelings, helping to build relationships, to understand why intense situations, relationships can break down and how to build them up again. All of that is very important information to learn, and the manner in which you can teach RSHE, which is different from how you can teach other subjects, really teaches pupils very, very useful skills. It teaches them how to be active listeners, how to monitor their own situation, how to explore the idea of diversity and difference and to celebrate difference, how to understand that you can have differences of opinion and that's okay, how to negotiate for things. There are so many fascinating and incredibly useful skills for pupils. And also you will probably have different pupils who will shine. You may have pupils who struggle for various barriers in the traditional subjects, and here they may have a lived experience or they may have common sense, which means that they really do have something to say and they can feel part of the subject and just feel like this is their moment. And that's one of the reasons why it's so exciting and so crucial. Another important thing to remember about the RSHE is that it's a statutory requirement. The curriculum is compulsory and it needs to be taught regularly. It's a must-have, not a nice-to-have. It needs to be inspected, or Ofsted will be looking at your RSHE policies and curriculum. You need to have lesson observations, so senior leaders need to sort of drop in and check in with you and see how you're getting on. And it needs to be assessed in some way, however you decide to do so, which is relevant in order to monitor that the pupils are acquiring knowledge and are acquiring new skills. But we can talk about what that might look like later. So whilst the beauty of the new RSHE is that really it is your opportunity to be creative, and some of you, your schools may have chosen a particular provider, for instance like Jigsaw or the PSHE Association, to provide you with the main body of your lessons. The idea is that you can adapt those to your own circumstances. So for instance, it would be remiss perhaps if a PSHE subject in Hastings didn't cover sea safety or railway safety or some of the things which are really particularly pertinent to Hastings. So you can bring those aspects in as well as these part of the curriculum which is compulsory. This clip is going to talk about some key principles which underpin all your lessons so that you can hold them in mind whilst you're thinking about how to deliver your lessons as you go forward. As you see here, we're going to start with looking at working agreements and how important they are, particularly to RSHE. We're going to think about what to do if you have a subject coming up which might affect somebody in the class. Look at who is entitled to access this curriculum, and then also as a particular technique which will be useful when teaching RSHE, looking at distancing. So let's start with the working agreement. Now, firstly, we particularly call it a working agreement rather than ground rules because that emphasises the idea that it really is about the pupils creating this with you and the fact that it can perhaps be adjusted if you all feel that there's something else needs to be added to it. So it's quite important to refer to it that way. And also because it's different from classroom rules, obviously it incorporates some of those ideas of respect that you may have in your classroom rules, but also it's just this agreement which is specific to your RSHE lessons, and it's quite important that they understand that at the beginning of each PSHE you may make some reference to the working agreement just to remind them about how we behave in this because it's a very different sort of lesson. It might feel quite tempting to avoid the bit about the working agreement when you start the lesson because it feels like, oh, just going over the same thing. But if you think about the type of things you're going to be discussing in RSHE lessons, it's a very good idea to remind the pupils and remind them that they came up with the working agreement themselves. So here are some examples of the type of things you might put on there, bearing in mind what you want to talk about when you're doing RSHE lessons. So reminding them about privacy, reminding them about listening and making it okay to challenge or disagree, but really reinforcing that idea about not making assumptions about people, really reinforcing the idea about not making judgment, and so that you can encourage the exploration of beliefs and without the fear of being judged. And you may want to put something on there about joining in, like trying to make sure that everybody joins in, but also the right to pass. So if you do have a session which involves people sharing and so on, it's also okay to just pass. So obviously the most important thing in an RSHE lesson is for pupils to feel safe. This example comes from the recent government guidance on how to teach PSHE, and I'm sure you can think of some of your own things that you would want to have in a working agreement so that the pupils felt safe. One thing that I thought of was perhaps to emphasise not sharing your personal information in class, but to also say if you have things you want to talk about, if it makes you think about things you want to talk about, then talk to me after the lesson or give a time when it's a good time to talk to another adult, just to emphasise the idea that pupils don't give away information which may be uncomfortable then if other pupils use it. Moving on to the idea of tackling sensitive subjects, there will be some subjects where you look at your classes and you think that's particularly going to affect a certain pupil and wonder how this may trigger them or upset them in some way. So there are several things you can do about this. Obviously you could speak to them about it and give them the opportunity perhaps not to attend that lesson, although the caveat to that is that to make sure that as they would probably stand to really benefit from some of the information you're going to share, make sure that they then do get access to that information perhaps on a one-to-one. You may want to inform their parents that this subject is coming up, or you might want to talk to your safeguarding officer or this child's mentor or anybody who has a particularly strong relationship with them, just to make sure that they're ready and they know that things may come up and it may affect how that pupil is feeling. A third important point about teaching RSHE is the entitlement to the curriculum. Everybody has a right to access the RSHE curriculum, and whereas in the past when it was a nice to have, perhaps some pupils went to do something else, but the government is emphasising that pupils, particularly those with SEND, really do need to access the curriculum, and that means that you will have to think about how to adjust it and to make it accessible to everybody, which might involve quite a lot of work, but also your creative thinking again, because pupils with SEND really probably need some of the relationships and mental health teaching more than the other pupils because of their life circumstances and how it impacts on their daily life. Differentiating in this way may feel like more work to do, but it's really about thinking creatively, and the beauty of the PSHE is that it doesn't necessarily need to be taught in the same way as other subjects. So you can really think about how we're going to make sure that these topics are completely accessible for everybody or differentiated for the different needs in the group. And luckily, there is some help at hand. The PSHE Association has created some resources specifically for teaching RSHE to pupils with a whole variety of special and additional needs. The final thing I wanted to talk about was introducing the idea of distancing. Children love stories. We all love stories as ways to learn, and it's a very useful way to help people to explore feelings they may have by looking at somebody else's story. And this is a very good technique for you when you're teaching all the different aspects of RSHE. Think about how you do that. Think about the people in your class and try to make sure that the pupils really can distance. So the case studies that you use, the stories that they're going to explore, can't be instantly recognisable as a pupil in the class. I've just realised that just mentioning distancing, we all think of distancing in a totally different way now, social distancing, which is also an issue when you're teaching PSHE. But if you want to find out more about distancing as a technique for teaching, psychological distancing, then you can look up creativeeducation.co.uk, which has some ideas about it. And also in the next video clip, I'll explore some more ideas about how to teach PSHE and also some ideas about assessment. How do we assess somebody making progress in these things? Finally, a question I get asked about a lot: if we're teaching pupils about mental health issues and mental health conditions, are they just going to start thinking they have these conditions and using the language to be very alarmed about what's going on? So we'll be exploring that in the next video. So that's it for the moment from me and everyone at Boingboing and the HOA. I'm hoping to see you live soon, but until that time, look out for the next video clips which can help you to address PSHE, RSHE teaching with joy. At Boingboing, we have a range of resources, including resources for the academic resilience approach to promote whole school mental health and well-being. You can access them at boingboing.org.uk for free.